I'm going to be talking to Richard Carlson, who is the Director, Energy Policy and Energy Exchange at Pollution Probe, about a recent deal that was announced between Ontario Power Generation and Microsoft. So welcome to the interview, Richard.
Thank you, Markham. It's good to be here.
Well, I'm really curious what you think about this. And the reason I'm interested is because in Alberta, which has the only real market-oriented system in Canada, corporations are going there and entering into power purchase agreements with developers, wind and solar developers, and then they will buy, let's say you're the Royal Bank and you want to buy enough electricity, the equivalent of what you're buying throughout all of your banks across Canada, and you buy that much solar power, and you've essentially then your electricity procurement is carbon neutral. And that's kind of the spin on this OPG Microsoft deal, but kind of not. And what do you make of it?
Well, first off, I agree with you that having a clean energy credit system or renewable portfolio renewable credit system, those are all good things and can be a very valuable part of an energy package in order to get for a net zero decarbonization. And one interesting thing about this deal with OPG and Microsoft is that it's not just renewables, it's all low carbon assets, so it includes nuclear and hydropower. It's also planned to be not just on a bulk, like you were saying, RBC would buy enough solar power to equal the amount of their annual generation or annual consumption. This would try to match it on an hour-to-hour basis so that all the generation that would be required for a Microsoft data center in Ontario could be met with clean resources. So it actually be met on the hour as opposed to some sort of large accounting exercise. So those are the good things. There's a few interesting differences though. First, the programs we've been seeing in Alberta and in the US, those are all for additional generation, additional power projects. So what you see is that RBC helps fund a solar power project in order to get the renewable credits. This is using existing low carbon assets. So it's using existing hydropower assets. In one case, it's using the Adambeck hydropower plant that was built over 100 years ago, and taking the credits from that, or the existing nuclear plants, and taking the credits from that and assigning them to Microsoft. So if you look at this from a straight accounting principle, that means that the electricity that the average person consumes in Ontario will be dirtier than what it is now, because the clean energy credits will be taken up by Microsoft. Now, how much of that, it may be a marginal difference, it may be a large difference, it's hard to say at this stage. But from what we have seen, there is no additional generation being built because of this deal.
Yeah, that was really, I guess, my problem that I had with this. And the background on this, of course, is that a number of the nuclear plants will be offline most of this decade, being refurbished. And so Ontario is planning to ramp up natural gas generation to compensate for that. And I know there are groups out there that have estimated the emissions from power generation could rise 400 to 600%. So at the same time that Microsoft is now, entered into the special deal to get electricity, everybody else is now going to be having to use more of this, higher emission intensity power, and the hype doesn't match the reality once you take that into account, I guess is my point.
No, I guess you could see, and I think the province does see this as a way of having OPG, which is owned by the province, have another source of revenue, and that would reduce, theoretically could reduce consumer bills, because OPG would have this revenue from the clean energy credits, and then that could be counted toward the bill. So this could reduce the bills that Ontarians are facing. But the problem is that while all the same electrons will be in the system, this is not actually changing where the power comes from. But on an accounting basis, the power other people use will be dirtier because those credits, the environmental credits, will be taken up by Microsoft and probably others. And this is part of a problem that we're seeing now, in that in early spring, the government announced that they wanted to create a clean energy credit system for Ontario. And the ISO, the system operator here in Ontario, held consultations in the early part of the summer and apparently released a report to the minister in July on what system this would look like. We have not heard anything about that. That report has not been made public, and we don't know what the clean energy credit system Ontario will have in 2023. But what was most people's concerns were about this additionality, is that it's great to have a clean energy credit system, but it should just be for these additional resources. And there are some people were concerned that if it's not just for additional resources, that it could mess up with their carbon accounting. For example, if you're a municipality and you're using the grid-based factor for your emissions over the year, well, if all the clean energy credits are sold to third parties and you don't buy any of these credits, then even though you've done nothing different, the emissions profile that you would be taking would be higher. So your emissions would be higher without doing anything.
And I suppose that would apply to other corporations, big corporations in Ontario as well, would it not?
Yes. Yeah, and to everybody else, the power that I am using at home, for example, would be theoretically dirtier. It was very difficult because you're dealing with, it's physically there is no difference, but on an accounting basis, it would be different.
Right. And I suppose there's, if Microsoft and OPG open the door to this kind of an agreement, then what would prevent other corporations from entering into a similar kind of agreement with OPG and only making the problem worse and worse and worse over time?
Exactly. And also how many of those would stay in Ontario as well, because it's not clear exactly whether or not a lot of these credits will be staying in Ontario. It appears from the Microsoft deal that the credits will be staying in Ontario, but it's not clear as to whether or not that would be an obligation in future deals. And it also comes to another thing, because OPG's assets are regulated by the Ontario Energy Board, the regulator. So every couple of years, OPG goes to the regulator, and there's a long process. It's very detailed, very exciting for us regulatory nerds, where they go through all the costs and work out what is going to be a reasonable rate for the next year. And OPG has their rates set, I believe, to 2026. And those rates are set. Now, if OPG is getting extra revenue from the sale of the carbon credits, how does that work into these regulated assets? So is OPG making that as profit? What's happening to that money? How is it going back to customers? Is it going to lead to lower regulated rates, in which case maybe it works out? Is it going to be diverted to develop new renewable projects? Or is it just going to be profit for the province? And it's unclear exactly what will happen to the revenue that OPG will receive.
Well, let's talk about another unclear aspect of this deal. So OPG and Microsoft are committed now to co-developing a platform using Microsoft technology to match customers' power needs with local carbon-free energy sources, which is a wonderful thing. But given the fact that the province has basically shut down renewables, where are those carbon-free energy sources going to come from?
Well, you have to remember that even with the expected increase in gas power plants, Ontario will still be around 85% clean, because that'll be mostly nuclear, hydro, and renewables. So there would still be enough clean energy. And it should be noted that unusually for a lot of these clean energy credit systems, nuclear is included and large hydro is included as well. So they would still be enough resources around to match most demands from corporations in order to maintain their hourly. And in fact, the use of nuclear could help them, because it's that way they could actually be able to arbitrage between more the stiff, firm nuclear power as opposed to trying to match up variable renewables to their hourly consumption.
Okay, but to your earlier point, that this isn't about adding renewable power generation capacity. It's about,
yes,
the pot stays the same. The fuel mix within the Ontario electricity sectors remains the same. It's just a matter of allocating it a little differently. And that leads me to think that this platform that OPG and Microsoft are developing, I mean, it looks to me like a bit of a shell game.
Theoretically, yes, I see where you're coming from, and that could be the case. I would hope that the revenue would be used to create new renewable assets or new clean energy assets. There is talk about it being about helping to fund the new SMR that the OPG is planning on building at Darlington. But without additional resources being added or without additionality being part of these deals, it is really just moving the credits around and not actually creating any new clean energy. So it's making people appear to be clean without actually being cleaner.
Right. It has the potential and it has the whiff of this, of being a greenwashing exercise.
Well, I think with any credit system, you have the problem with the greenwashing exercises. This one is a bit more so than the others because there is nothing there that it can be attached to. It is just what was previously assigned to someone else is now assigned to you. And so that makes it a bit harder. It's also a bit different because OPG has been able to do this because of their contract. All the other renewable power producers in Ontario, all those, the wind and the solar, their environmental credits are owned by the IESO. They don't own them. OPG, though, with their contract, because they're regulated, they are unique. They uniquely own their carbon credits, so they can actually sell them. So they could also take the corner of this market because they'd be one of the few producers who would actually be able to sell their credits onto the market at this time. So they'd kind of corner the market.
Well, thank you very much.
Unless the ISO starts to sell them.
Gotcha. Well, thank you very much for this. I mean, when I saw the press release come from OPG and Microsoft, the alarm bells went off. It didn't sound as kosher. It didn't sound as revolutionary as they were making it sound. Of course, this is a marketing exercise. I get that. But now we get a better sense of where the pitfalls might be. And the fact that my take on this after talking to you is that this is not it doesn't provide the benefits that the two parties claim it does. And it opens the door for potentially more, I don't know if abuse is the right word, but we'll use it anyway, in the future. So thank you very much for this. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you, Markham. Have a good day.